There is a tower on Miami's waterfront that was supposed to be different. Not just another luxury high-rise climbing the Florida sky. Different. The kind of building that redefines a city, that makes a skyline unforgettable, that tells the world a civilization is at its peak. 817 feet of glass and steel rising above Biscayne Bay, shaped like a sail catching the wind, bearing the name of the most storied automotive brand in the world, Aston Martin. A name that carries 7 decades of Bond films, of Le Mans, of British aristocracy in motion. The kind of name that makes a buyer feel, the moment they sign, that they have crossed into a different category of human. The penthouse alone was priced at $59 million. The total sellout reportedly topped $1 billion, and the building opened 99% pre-sold. Every unit gone before the first resident unpacked a single suitcase. That is what a trophy looks like in the golden age of branded luxury. That is what the peak of a civilization looks like, just before the cracks begin to show. And now those cracks are not metaphorical. They are physical. They run through concrete balconies 60 stories above a busy Miami street. They are in the seawall, they are in the elevator shafts, they are in the fire suppression system. Loose concrete has already been removed as an immediate life safety hazard. The association's own attorney said, simply, that spalling concrete should not occur in any high-rise. This is not a rumor. This is what a forensic engineering report found after the people who actually lived there finally took control of the building and hired an independent firm to look at what they had bought. What they found changes the entire story of Miami's golden decade of luxury construction. And if you have ever suspected that the marketing of spectacular wealth conceals a much quieter and more disturbing reality, what happened to the Aston Martin Residences will confirm everything you feared. If you want to watch empires fall in real time, before the rest of the world catches on, subscribe. Empire Falls documents the decline most people are still too invested in the illusion to see. The Aston Martin Residences is a 46-story chapter in that story, and we are only on page 1. Let us go back to where this begins. Not with the cracks, with the dream. Because to understand how something like this fails, you have to understand first how powerful the dream was. The branded residence model is one of the defining inventions of our era of global luxury. The idea is elegantly simple. Take a name that the ultra-wealthy already revere. A fashion house, an automaker, a watch brand, a hotel group. License that name to a real estate developer. Attach it to a residential tower, then charge a premium over comparable, non-branded properties. A premium that, according to Savills, averages 33% globally and in some markets reaches 47% in emerging cities, where the mere association with a global luxury brand is itself worth a year's salary. The branded residence sector has nearly tripled in size compared with 2015, growing from 323 schemes to around 910 by the close of 2025. With over 800 more contracted and in the pipeline through 2032, fashion houses, automotive brands, and lifestyle labels now represent around 17% of new schemes. Aston Martin moved into this world with precision. The tower at 300 Biscayne Boulevard Way was described as the world's first Aston Martin-branded residential building. Not a collaboration, not a licensing footnote. The first. Developer German Coto, an Argentinian grocery magnate who built a supermarket empire in South America, purchased the 1.3-acre site at the mouth of the Miami River and Biscayne Bay for $125 million in 2014. He launched sales in 2016, built the tower with a $200 million construction loan, and eventually opened the doors in April 2024, delayed from the original 2020 target by the pandemic. What the buyers were promised was not merely a place to live. They were promised a marina, a private helipad, beach club access, concierge services calibrated to the standards of the Aston Martin universe. The scion of a medical device company paid $23 million for a unit on the 60th floor. A Mexican industrial magnate paid $18 million for the 62nd. These were not people purchasing apartments. They were purchasing entry into a world. And that world, from the first day, was already not what it appeared. But the construction defects are not where the story of the Aston Martin Residences begins its decline. The first sign came quietly, as these things always do. Before the forensic engineers arrived, before the lawsuits were filed, before the words "spalling concrete" appeared in a circuit court complaint in Miami-Dade County, there was a moment in May 2024 when water damage appeared inside the brand new building. And that is where the second chapter of this story begins. Because what allegedly happened next is the kind of thing that, once you understand it, makes every other detail fall into place. German Condo, according to the lawsuit filed by the Condominium Association, allegedly arranged for his own general contracting firm to perform repair work on that water damage without competitive bids, without a board vote, and without disclosing his dual role as both building developer and contractor performing the repair. There were no written contracts. The documentation the lawsuit alleges was scant, and yet the developer-controlled board and his construction company reportedly profited from 2 insurance claims tied to that incident. This was the pattern establishing itself in its earliest form. At the time, the board was not independent. It was composed of Condo as president, a former executive from his supermarket chain as vice president, and an employee of a separate Condo business as treasurer and secretary. When residents eventually took control of the building in March 2025, standard practice, after a developer turns over a condo association, they hired lawyers and forensic accountants to review the finances. What they found was described in the February 2026 lawsuit as an immense shell game. Contracts for building management, concierge services, security, valet, and cleaning had allegedly been signed immediately before the handover, all with companies owned by Condo or his associates. One of those contracts allegedly leased a unit on the 3rd floor to use as a management office for $8,500 a month, even though the association already had designated office space in the building, free of charge. The lawsuit alleges Condo was serving as the condo board president while also being designated as the landlord in that same lease agreement. Concierge services that were allegedly never delivered were reportedly paid for. Association finances allegedly showed incomplete records, misappropriated funds, and long-term financial harm to the people who had bought into the dream. The first lawsuit, filed in February 2026, sought more than $5 million in damages and a full accounting of the building's finances. The president of the new association, a Miami attorney who is himself a unit owner, told the press with the measured precision of someone trying to contain his own disbelief, "I did not get what I was promised, which was a luxury experience." Quite the opposite. But the financial allegations, as damaging as they are, turned out to be only the surface. Because in April 2025, when those same new owners hired Epic Forensics and Engineering to conduct a property condition assessment of the building they now governed, what the engineers found went far beyond a missing helipad or a manipulated contract. And here is where the narrative shifts from fraud into something older and more unsettling. Something that sounds, if you have been paying attention to Florida long enough, deeply familiar. The forensic report documented cracks in concrete, exposed post-tension tendons, waterproofing failures, seawall cracks and corrosion, elevator defects, leaks in fire protection systems, and the defect that the association's own attorney called the most alarming: slab edges on balconies showing signs of erosion and loose concrete, running the risk of construction materials falling hundreds of feet onto the street below. The association had already paid to remove loose concrete pieces flagged as an immediate life safety hazard before the lawsuit was even filed. Think about that sentence. A building that opened in 2024 opened to buyers who paid between $4 million and $59 million for their units. And within 1 year of taking control of the building, the residents were paying to remove concrete that was falling off balconies 60 stories above a public street. The lawsuit filed in April 2026 against the developer, the general contractor Coastal Construction, the architecture firm Revuelta Architecture International, D. Simone Consulting Engineering, Shamrock Engineering, Capform, and approximately a dozen additional subcontractors alleged negligence, building code violations, and construction defects across virtually every major system in the building. The pool and spa waterproofing had failed, the seawall was corroding, a balcony was drooping, fire sprinkler joints were loose. Water was intruding through openings that should have been sealed. The cost of repairs was projected in the millions. The association sought at least $750,000 and a court order compelling the defendants to fix what they built. The developer's spokesperson called the allegations outlandish. A coastal construction representative said they pride themselves on working with developers and associations to swiftly resolve any issues. Riverwalk East Developments said it remains confident the court will reach a fair and favorable determination. These are the standard responses. They are the responses that get filed in the archive and forgotten. What does not get forgotten is the image. A building that sold $1 billion in units, opening with shattered glass on balconies. Unsealed concrete. Chunks of concrete falling to the ground. Exposed reinforcement steel beginning to rust before the first lease renewal was signed. What we have traced in this chapter of the story, the alleged financial manipulation, the missing amenities, the forensic catalog of structural failures, the concrete falling from the sky above a city street, is one face of a pattern that runs far deeper than any single tower. I assembled the disciplined framework, the early warning signals most people miss, and the geography of where these patterns lead, in a guide called When Everything Falls. Scan the code on your screen or tap the link in the description below. But stay here, because the final pattern this tower reveals is the one that connects not just to Miami, but to every city in the world, where the luxury dream is being sold with the same architecture of promises and the same indifference to what holds them up. Because here is what the Aston Martin story is really about. It is not about one developer. It is not about one tower. It is about a system. The attorney for the condo association said it directly when he described the construction defects lawsuit as emblematic of a bigger problem. Why cities allow developers to keep putting up projects time after time with construction defects. Florida's construction boom has been extraordinary. The branded residence sector alone saw 240 new projects added to the global pipeline in 2024 across 100 markets. In South Florida, the pipeline has not stopped. And the pressure that creates on quality is not new information. In 2021, a 12-story building in Surfside collapsed in the middle of the night and killed 98 people. The Champlain Tower South investigation found multiple structural deficiencies, including understrength design, misplaced steel reinforcement, and widespread construction deviations from design documents and building codes, including missing or improperly placed reinforcement dowels, conditions that existed, federal investigators said, from the time construction was complete. The same city, the same industry, the same appetite for speed. One attorney working on Florida's wave of post-Surfside construction defect lawsuits said it plainly. Historically, in a development boom like there has been in the last several years, quality gets compromised for quantity, time and time again. The Aston Martin Residences is not an exception to that pattern. It is a particularly expensive illustration of it. It is one thing for that pattern to manifest in a building that sold units at $200,000. It is something categorically different when it manifests in a building where the cheapest unit cost millions and the brand name being sold was synonymous with precision engineering, with decades of motorsport excellence, with the idea that the finest details are never compromised. That gap, the gap between what the brand promised and what the concrete delivered, is where the real story lives. One of the attorneys for the condo association called it a buyer beware moment. That phrase lands differently when the buyer paid $23 million on the 60th floor. It lands differently when the product being sold was not just square footage and an ocean view, but a guarantee written in 100 years of automotive heritage that this, above all things, would be built right. What happens to the Aston Martin brand itself is a separate question with its own trajectory. The legal issues here, as one analyst observed, carry reputational weight beyond this tower alone. The world's first Aston Martin-branded residential building is now the subject of 2 lawsuits alleging fraud, self-dealing, and structural failures. The brand did not build this building. It licensed its name. But in the logic of branded luxury, the name is the promise. And when the promise fails, the name is the wound. Half a mile from the Aston Martin Residences, a tower designed by the late Zaha Hadid 1000 Museum, faces similar legal exposure. Its condo association filed a construction defects lawsuit in February 2025, and a second lawsuit in April 2026 alleging that the developer waived reserve funding because it did not have the money to pay. Two towers, half a mile apart, both carrying names that were supposed to be a guarantee, both now carrying lawsuits instead. This is not coincidence. This is the signature of a decade that built too fast, sold too high, and inspected too little. Rome had its own version of this. Vitruvius, writing in the 1st century before Christ, described the signs of decline in Roman construction. Contractors who cut material, inspectors who looked away, patrons who wanted grandeur faster than engineering could honestly deliver it. The concrete of the Colosseum still stands 2,000 years later, not because Rome was wealthy, but because Roman concrete was mixed with volcanic ash that created a chemical bond stronger than almost anything built since. The concrete falling from Miami balconies in 2024 is a different kind of story. It is the story of a city that confused the marketing of greatness with greatness itself. That is the pattern Florida is now confronting, slowly, through forensic reports and circuit court filings, and attorneys who describe the inspection system as flawed, and the permitting system as flawed, and the entire development chain as optimized for the moment of sale rather than the decade of habitation. The residents of the Aston Martin Residences are not victims of a single bad actor. They are the visible terminus of a system that worked exactly as it was designed to work, right up until the moment they had to live inside it. Empires do not fall from the outside. They fall from the foundation up. They fall when the gap between the story being told and the reality being built becomes wide enough to fall through. The Aston Martin Tower in Miami did not crack because the city ran out of money or ambition or buyers. It cracked because the system that was supposed to prevent that from happening was run by the same people who had every incentive to make sure the crack was never noticed until after the check cleared. That is the lesson this tower leaves behind. And it is not a lesson about real estate. It is a lesson about what happens in any empire when the standards that built the thing to greatness are quietly abandoned in the name of speed and profit and the performance of prestige. The cracks are showing. The question every buyer, every investor, every city planner looking at the next tower going up on a Florida waterfront has to ask is not whether they can see the cracks. It is whether the system around them is designed to show them the truth before it is too late. Empires do not fall in a day, they fall in patterns. The pattern is already in the court records. Tell us in the comments which city you think shows the next crack. And subscribe. The next chapter of Empire Falls is already loaded.